Hi, and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. I'm your host, Magical Bum, and today we have a special event on Is Christianity Original? Today we have Sir Edward debating for Christianity and Zoo Stormbird uh, arguing for the occultish side. It should be an interesting debate, and whenever you're ready, Sir Dorgan Fly is going to be keeping time and score. So I guess I'll hand it off to him.
Yeah, you guys know the deal. Zoo, we're going to give you a first opening remarks, and then Edward, your openings, and then we'll hand it back to Zoo to give his first point, and we'll go back and forth. We got 3 or 4 or 5 minute rounds here of just questions and rebuttals, or comments and rebuttals to those. So Zoo, whenever you're ready, start your opening.
All right. So the premise is that for a long time the elite occultists have had held separate diametric ways of interpreting things. They have what's known as the exoteric for the masses, which are more literalist interpretations. They're much more watered down, devolved, diluted, written in the texts that are available to all the laymen. And then you have what the priesthood and the initiates.
Zoo, you seem to have cut off right there. Maybe we get a stop in the time.
Yep, stopped.
You there, buddy?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, cool. Go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
All right, so the inner mysteries, essentially what they do is they record what is the secrets within them. These are esoteric. These are not meant to be literal. These are, the symbolistic riddles, the ciphers, etc., the Gordian knot, the Ophic egg, the divine store bird known as Zoo, the two-headed eagle, and essentially what's happened is these symbols have been watered down to the point where oftentimes they'll be taken as literal interpretations for the, they'll be personified, anthropomorphized, into deities, and something that's much more of a relatable format for the masses. And essentially, my belief is that this is something that has definitely influenced Christianity to the point where it's not exactly original. In fact, I can't really say any religion's, original because of how they operate. Their logic, the order. It all begins with scriptures that are, they say, give their own ethos because the authors claim divine inspiration. This is not unique to the Bible. It's a common phenomenon within any sort of religion, whether it be the Hindus and their Vedas, whether it be, the Islamic with the Quran, the Torah for the Jews, and so forth. And there are also other modus operandi by how they self-legitimize their own creation of stories. So essentially what I'm getting at is why I don't believe it's original is because of the elements that it draws upon, the symbols it draws upon, how the symbols are cleverly incorporated into the new works, adapted from older works, how even the Genesis story is not an original story. There's older Mesopotamian myths where you can clearly see they drew inspiration from, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, when they have an ark there. They have, the Enuma Elish, known as the Anunnaki tablets, that describes creation. There's so many different flood and creation stories that predate all these writings that we're familiar with, known as monotheism, that have these eerie similarities. It's hard for me to come to the conclusion that they're original, totally original.
What in the world?
Yeah, Jumper, we're recording, so just keep your mic silent. All right, Storm, I'll take it as that was your opening. You're about a minute shy anyway. But Edward, if you want to give your opening, and then we'll throw it back to Zoo for his first comment.
All right, sure thing. So the essence of my point is basically that based on the evidence provided for Christianity and the inner workings of the religion, the scripture, and how everything is put together, it's possibly the most original original religion of all time. And why I say that is there's multiple accounts from other sources saying, like, that there was a flood, that they had seen certain things in the Bible like giants. And I know you brought up the Mesopotamian and some ancient Sumerian things. When Gilgamesh was told to build an ark, Irvin Finkel, the leading the leading cuneiform researcher of this age, he took the dimensions of what was the ark that he was supposed to build, and it was just a giant cube. So the similarities that people draw between these certain civilizations and stuff like that, they actually hold little to no weight, and some of them are even fabricated entirely. So to close, my point is that through several sources, whether that be inside and outside of the Bible, secular sources, it proves that not only was the story of Jesus original and Christianity itself original, it's the one that has the most historical backing.
All right, well done. Zoo, we'll throw it back to you for your first comment. Why, wherever you want to go with this, is Christianity original?
Yes, but the very fact of the chronology does suggest that they drew at least inspiration from it. You're taking minor nuances like the exact dimensions, which later authors, who are, once again, the revisionists, would likely update to make it look more aesthetic. I mean, anyone who could have read the old ones and did the dimensions and saw that it was like a square was like, this doesn't look like it'd be aesthetically pleasing. Let's convert it to our units with our own little design to it. And that's an easy twist that any of the authors could have done. The internal consistency, however, so there's a few issues with the internal consistency and the fact that, one, sometimes they don't always match up to certain translations of and interpretations of the Hebrews. That's why you still have much debate amongst the Jews and the Christians. Another is that an easy way to do that is if they do take Old Testament and create scenes in their narrative that supposedly fulfill these events, then they have successfully done internal consistency by the standards of the Bible. There's nothing that we know on the historical record that we can verify this with. Only that we would have to trust and believe the authors and believe that they are divinely inspired, which once again is a claim made by any religious scribes or writers or revisionists or whatever you have it. Another issue I have seemed to have, because I have went through this whole ordeal, and it seems like, so a lot of the symbols and a lot of the things are clearly in historical records something the Catholic Church, who was the hegemony, who was the monopoly, who was the dogmatist for many, many years, openly incorporated into Christianity, like Sunday worship, as in contrast with the worship of the Hebrews, which would have been Sabbath, Friday evening to Saturday evening, is now Sunday, typically, generally, orthodoxically, traditionally. Sunday, of course, is almost quite obviously worship of the sun. That is where the etymology for Sunday comes from. This is a very common phenomenon throughout the pagan myths and polytheistic pantheons, is that they worship and adore the sun. A lot of people like me speculate that it has to do with them just being naturalists or observationalists who, anthropomorphize and personifize these natural events into clever fables and other ways to explain them through their gods and their narratives, and etc. I don't see anything different from Christianity. In fact, I see a lot of similarities between Christian, the Christian story with astrotheological premises pertaining to Christmas itself, So we've got the winter solstice amongst many cultures that is worshipped and venerated as the death and rebirth of the sun. Zoroastrianism, you've got Mithric rites that pertain to this, you've got Babylonian rites and Chaldeans who believe this, many people who incorporated astrologies to their various pantheons beforehand did the same. What I do think was clever is that they literally personified it in a way that, people could read it literally, but it draws so heavily from these previous myths about astrology that are reflections of our observation of what we see every year, and the date itself, which they celebrate Christmas with the birth of Christ, is also something that has been worshipped in Mithraite rites and with the Soul Invictus cults that were very dominant during the time that the church dogma was coming to power under Constantine. Constantine openly said he converted to Christianity, as a public image, but he never did. He was a pagan until, right at the very end on his deathbed. Oral tradition has he was baptized on his deathbed.
Okay.
All right, you were 1 minute shy. I'll let you go there, Edward.
Yeah, so starting at the other arc from Gilgamesh, Irving Finkel has no reason to be to be changing the original text of the Sumerians, because all he's trying to do is read them and understand what it's saying, and he's the leader of that field. So when he read it and looked at what the dimensions say, it said, yeah, it's a giant cube. So what you had said was that people could have taken that narrative and then drew it to make an actual boat, but what you're forgetting is that in Mount Ararat, if you go there right now, it's actually a national tourist spot. You can go to Noah's Ark, the one that they'd found. Ron White and a group of archaeologists and scientists took a field test of what they thought was Noah's Ark, because their sole mission was to go out and find Noah's Ark. It was, is this Noah's Ark? If it's not, okay. If it is, cool, but we're not trying to get fooled. They scanned lasers into the ground. They found anchor stones with their family's inscription on them. And then, like where the Bible said, it said it rested in Mount Ararat, and that's where they went. It's not like they found a structure and just pinned Noah's Ark on it. Even the Chinese had went back and found and scanned lasers into it and everything, and went inside of it and found more inscriptions and everything. That video on YouTube was called "The Raiders of Noah's Ark," and also the translations, like how you said, like people can change certain interpretations through translations. Well, that would be true, yes, but here's the thing about that. If somebody was to take the original text off of what actually happened, which would, and we'd say that's the Torah, like the original Hebrew Old Testament is the Torah, and then later on the New Testament comes along, and then they're speaking Greek, so they took that and they translated both of those into English, and that's what you call the King James Version. But the Greek was the Septuagint. So the Septuagint is the initial text of the King James Bible. That's the one that's the oldest and has been untouched when you compare it to the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. So the Dead Sea Scrolls as well proved that it hadn't changed in over 2,000 years. And when the Alexandrian scripts came around, people had changed clear historical meanings of like the word slave and servant. They took servant out and put slave in, because a servant is a willing worker who pays off a debt. And if they so please, they can call their master and commit their family to that master, and then bore their ear with all, and their master has to provide a living for them. A slave doesn't get to make that choice. A slave has no free will. So that's a clear, and also we see what's called sharecropping and stuff like that after the recent 400-year slavery. So we clearly know what indentured servitude is, and we see the motives behind those people, because they changed other things in the Bibles, where they changed what's it called? They said there's a verse that says husband or wives submit to your husbands, and they usually leave it there in the newer translations, but in the King James, the next verse expands on it and says for men to do the same. Now, the pagan infiltration of the Roman Catholic Church, right? Here's the thing about that. They were killing Christians before that, and Christians were converting more Christians than they could kill. So I keep forgetting which it was. It was either Augustine or Constantine who infiltrated the church, made the changes, made the edits to the Bible. Now, here's the thing. They made Catholicism, and Christianity was still around. They mandated that to be the state religion of Rome. Now, the things that they added to it, even though Rome had a monopoly being a superpower and being, hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that.
You're at the 1 minute mark there, Edward. 1 minute.
Okay, I'm almost done. So the Catholic Church added all those things into the Bible, but they added it to just sway it from the original message, and the original hasn't even died. And all the additions to the Bible and all the additions to Christianity stood itself alone from Catholicism. There's huge doctrinal errors comparing it from Catholicism to Christianity. And Christmas, nobody actually knows if Jesus was born on Christmas. That's just an estimate. So if there's a Christian that is celebrating Christmas saying that Jesus was born on Christmas, that's just them not doing their due diligence. They don't know if Jesus is born on Christmas. And the pagan traditions taken from or added to the system of beliefs by the Catholic Church is just an addition from a whole other belief set.
All right, so back to you, Zoo.
I think that you definitely made a good point about Catholicism and how they incorporated things. Really, a point I really like about that is you look at evangelism and the role of evangelism, as I've been taught by Christian theologians, is to find a connection with an audience who's not familiar with the gospel, and find shared common values and ways to connect with those people so that you bring them in on the you can bring them in on the gospel of Christ, the good news, the evangelion, and in doing so, this actually encouraged early church fathers of multiple orthodoxies, and ended up being adopted by the heterodoxies out of ignorance during the Protestant Reformation to this very day, to incorporate things like pagan symbols, and the various forms of the cross, for example. So what's the best way I can go into more details about this? So there's so many different forms of the cross that Christians today use, and many of them draw from pagan sources, mostly fertility or sun worship. So, for example, the Iron Cross is an old sun worship symbol. You've got the Coptic cross, which is literally just an ankh, which is very obviously an Egyptian symbol, because the Egyptians use a hieroglyphic language and would incorporate that into their very language. And you have the customs that they adopted. The days which they worship predominantly is on Sunday. You have so many other things that that are extra biblical, as the theologians would say, and they accept it anyways because, it was done to win people over, which these theologians would argue is more important than keeping the scripture purity. And in doing so, there's also different oral traditions that different sects have, and really what you see is that Christianity has become the most successful synchronistic religion that there is, because it basically, what I think is, it took polytheism and turned it into monolatrism, by subverting a previously established monotheistic religion that practically did the same thing with the Canaanites. And what I say by this is that if you look at cross similarities between the supreme god of the Canaanite pantheon, El, and you look at Yahweh, Yahuwah, many different ways. People don't even know how to pronounce their own God's name. It's actually a truth about Christianity and Judaism. The cross similarities between El and Yahweh are very, abundant, except for the fact that the priesthood made it very clear in Yahweh worship that Asherah is not to be worshipped. Very, very clear on that. Divorcing El of his divine goddess, his wife, etc. And this brings up another interesting point that the Bible, as a historical document, makes about its own flaws within its own religion, is that the number one recurring theme in the Old Testament, in my opinion, is idolatry, which is falling away to the other gods of the surrounding nations in various forms, including not just God worship, but their customs, like in the book of Judges, when the people wanted a king, God was like, no, that's probably not a good idea, and they just kept begging and begging and begging, and eventually they got Saul. And Saul, was this archetype of someone with no heart. He was a coward, but he had everything that people expected him to have in a king. He was tall, handsome, came from a good family, and then
1 minute.
That's completely contrasted with David, of course, but what you end up having is you have multiple instances in the entire Old Testament where they fall to Canaanite worship, with Baal, aka Baal. Baal is actually like Adonai. Baal is to El as Adonai is to Yahweh. If that makes any sense, my simile. Um, it's easy to see how one might think they worship the same God, and they just created their own mythos about it.
All right, Edward, if you want to go round two.
Okay, so first off, the Jews were always monotheistic. They never really split up the Godhead. There is the Trinity, of course, where in Genesis 2 or Genesis 1, either Genesis 1 or 2, where they said, where God had said, "And let us make man in our image." That's talking about Jesus. There's many Jesus references before Jesus was actually born. Like when once people read the verse, and God had never revealed himself to anybody, because if anybody had seen God, they would die. There was I think it was Abraham who God showed himself to, but that was pre-incarnate Christ. There was the prophecy in the garden of the snake, or what God said to the snake. He said, "I will put enmity between the seed of the woman and your seed," Satan's seed, "and the seed will bruise his head, and he will bruise his heel." So that was talking about Jesus, because he was rectifying the situation, because Jesus would ultimately be the sacrifice to forgive sin. Now, the Canaanites and the Jews, and the theme of idolatry, the reason why God punished them for idolatry is because God would provide for them for several years throughout the wilderness. He brought them out of immense situations, entire civilization of slavery. He what's it called? He delivered them from all kinds of things, and all he wanted was just simple service, and they decided to run and go serve other gods, right? They always call it lowercase gods, because these were usually gods bound to a quote unquote gods bound to a statue, like Moloch. Or when the Canaanites were worshiping Moloch, they burned babies alive in a brass basin, and they were completely detestable. So when they were doing these things, right, and I've heard somebody say to me before that, like, oh, they were sacrificing babies to Yahweh. Well, in that situation, Yahweh is not asking for any of that, right? So it's like if you have a cat and your cat kills a mouse and brings it to you, you didn't want it, you didn't tell it to go do that either. It just brought you a dead mouse, and you're just like, well, I don't know what to do with this, I don't want it. So if people were sacrificing babies to Yahweh, that, I mean, there was no order for them to get that. Now, falling to Canaanite worship, the Canaanites had an immense amount of problems. They were giants. They had fallen angel DNA. They had an incredible gene pool problem. That's why they were eradicated from the line. They were doing those detestable things as well, and that's what the flood came and brought them away, and it killed them all. So with Canaanite worship, they're not worshiping the same God at all. If people were sacrificing babies to Yahweh, Yahweh gave no instruction to do anything like that, because why would God kill the Canaanites for sacrificing children and then order his people to sacrifice children? It doesn't work like that. And I know you brought up before, like they pull up legends like this in Mithras, but Mithras doesn't compare to Jesus, like in the slightest. Like there's so much that it doesn't work. Like
The Virgin birthday on December 25th for deity. There's three
Actually-
legends.
Just don't interrupt. Don't interrupt while he's finishing, please.
yeah, no sources say that he was born of a virgin. He was actually born of a rock. The origins of the Mithraic mysteries, page 36, says he was born from a rock. Commodiani Instructionis says he came from a rock. That's Instructions 13. Also, when he was born, he was created as an adult. That's Ahura Mazda, Avesta Corda, Avesta 6-7. None of the sources, even the experts, say he was born of a virgin. He also didn't have 12 disciples. He had 2 named Cautes and Catopatres. That's a hard word to read. The concept of 12 disciples came from an image of him slaying a bull while surrounded by 12 figures. They call it the son of the zodiac. That came from the origin of the Mithraic mysteries, page 10-17. And what else? There's also 3 types of Mithraic, origin, so you have to narrow it down if you're going to talk about who was saying what. Roman mystery cult of Mithra, and the Persian, the Persian and Iranian versions, and then there's no evidence of him being born on December 25th, like whatsoever. Even Jesus, like the whole narrative of Jesus even being born on December 25th has no weight because he just, nobody knows. No, like it was an estimate. Like to claim that they know and to have these things. Also, Mythos was written way after Jesus as well, so it's not like
1 minute.
it's not like Jesus was or Christian writers were taking from this. The narrative of each story wasn't related in the beginning, and it still isn't in the end. It's just people started lying and trying to make conclusions from any of the sources that they had in the limited ones because they barely have anything on Mithras. I'm finished.
All right, that's a yield. Storm, if you want to do the final round, and then we'll go into Q&A.
All right, so I'm glad you brought up that point, everything, because I think you assume that I'm just saying Jesus is a copy of Mithras. No, I'm not saying that. Oh, I'm saying there's striking similarities, but more importantly, what's opened up the question of is Jesus born from previous myths, and is there plenty of material for this to happen? Can a butter mix match what they want out of it? Yes, there is plenty of material, plenty of similarities between that and all one. Motives, there's, I don't know, you've got Krishna, Horus, all these, and they had these mystery rites. These mystery rites they were considered secretive. They were like secret societies. They were oath-bound and everything. So many of the writings didn't come up until hundreds of years after the cult had been around, What you will see is an overall theme of there being a solar masculine deity, and there are many celestial virgin births, like with in the Babylonian. There's the Semiramis, who is she's the queen of heavens in the Babylonian mythos, and she had a virgin son. She had a son while she was a virgin. You see a lot of these happened beforehand, and also you look at the internal consistency of the Old Testament. The Old Testament straight up says there were periods when the Hebrews were polytheistic while being monotheistic. They worshipped alongside. They had to kill one another for this. Okay, so the story of the Golden Bull, you have people getting impatient, so they took customs that they basically learned from the Egyptians and fashioned a gold calf, which is sacred for the divine bull. Yes, and in their minds, they thought they were worshiping God through this bull, but Moses had to explain to them in the Old Testament that what he was really doing was idol worship, and this goes against the Ten Commandments that God had just given them in the cave while everyone was sitting out here worshiping the golden bull. What you seem to have is, throughout the Old Testament, periods of monotheism and polytheism being worshipped alongside each other, and then some pious priests come around saying, no, we got to separate ourselves and segregate ourselves from the rest of society because we're losing our ways. You have this with Ezra when he declares that you shall not marry a foreign woman, and if you're married a foreign woman, you must divorce her or leave. You have many of the prophets who struggle with these issues because of the fact that they're drawing in from other cultures around them. This is the same issue that arose during, Samuel and Kings saga when, with even having kings in the first place, and then all the corruption that happened with it. You have kings who, in their minds, believe they're worshiping Yahweh, but in reality, were just adopting practices from Moloch worship to worship Yahweh. Yes, as far as I know, there's no text suggesting that they should be doing this, and that's why it was considered wicked in the Old Testament. But at the same time, there's confusion amongst the people, shows that they truly don't know how to worship well. Even today, many Christians, Christian preachers and whatnot, argue that most Christians don't know how to worship well. I'm constantly hearing these points like, you should be worshiping every day. You should be trying to worship at every moment, God. And that every mistake you make is, a form of idolatry. This is something that gets expanded upon in the New Testament when they start revising Judaic beliefs, which happens a lot. It's kind of confusing because when you look at Matthew 5, 5, or when Jesus is talking about how he should not an iota of the law and the prophets shall be abolished until they're all fulfilled. And then later on, he straight up tells the Pharisees that he's not going to fulfill all the prophecies that they expect him to in this generation. He's just going to show them the sign of Jonah, which is him dying and being reborn 3 days later. So what you happen in here is you're having this weird contradiction.
1 minute.
And this is something Christians struggle with. Do we follow all the stuff in the Old Testament, or do we go to Acts of Apostles where it says we can, kind of pick and choose what we want?
Okay, I'd like to respond to that one. I know we have to go to Q&A after.
Yeah.
You still got 1 5-minute response, Edward, and then we'll go to Q&A, and you guys can do a back and forth, or we'll open up the mics for everybody to talk.
How much time left?
What was the question? You had a minute left if you wanted to finish up.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'll finish up. So, really what you're seeing is that this is something that's common with all religions, in my personal opinion, that you have scriptures from older traditions, and the problem with that is that, yes, just like if you were to tell someone a story, and they were to tell their friend a story, and their friend a story, what you're going to see is different interpretations and versions, and eventually it's going to be so distorted that it's not going to be the same. Most of religion started off like an oral tradition before being codified. That's how almost every religion starts off, and it happens through these cults that became religion, in my opinion. That's what's being translated to the excerpt. The inner mysteries of the priesthood being spread to the masses. People who are considered profane in the latest view. And what you really see is that Christianity is no different from many of the religions in how it claims its own ethos, morals, and theologies that it expresses in their divine Savior, their self, who is seen as being very similar to Balder or Horus or Mithra in certain aspects. Who's to say that the writers of the New Testament didn't have access to these stories?
All right. Yeah, that was a little more than a minute, but that's okay because I cut you off. So, if you guys want to have a back and forth and talk about one specific topic at a time, or we can open up the...
I had to respond to that one.
Sure, yeah. If you want to respond to that one, go for it. And then, if anybody else wants to ask a question, we'll just do a 2-minute mic rule, no over talking. So if you ask someone a question, let them finish. And then, we'll go from there.
Okay. So you asked how come they don't have any, how comes the writers of the New Testament had no access to the stories? Well, the reason that the writers of the New Testament didn't have access to the stories of Mithras is because Mithras wasn't around at that time. The stories of Mithras weren't around till any of that. He was from the 2nd century, and Christianity was about in the 1st century. So nobody had anything to pull from, because 1, these were eyewitness testimonies. 2, they died for what they saw, which is incredibly weird. And it doesn't happen much in other religions where somebody is killed for the witness of somebody else. They were martyred for their faith. They did not give up when the government pursued them. What's it called? When you look at what Jesus said also about fulfilling the law, he said he came to fulfill the law, not to abolish it. So what he meant by that was he fulfilled the Levitical law and the 10 Commandments, and to its entirety. And people had objections, and he showed them how he was actually right. Like when the Pharisees came and saw him picking corn, he said, "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath?" Because he wasn't hurting anybody, he wasn't working, he wasn't doing much. He asked them, if your donkey fell in a ditch on the Sabbath, would you save him? Also, the day of worship thing. I was raised Seventh-day Adventist, so I know just about all the objections with the day of worship, because the Sabbath isn't even the day of worship; it's the day of rest. It's in Levitical law. You're supposed to on the Sabbath. You're supposed to stay inside your house. You're supposed to not kindle a fire. You're supposed to just stay inside. You're not supposed to make anybody else work, and you're not supposed to work. If you made somebody else work, you'd have to kill them. And it was serious. I don't know why it was that serious, but it was serious. So when you have these ideas and you have these stories from other people who came after Christianity, and you say that, these similarities, and I pointed out in Mithras, I have more to point out, but we can do that in the back and forth. That Mithras was not born on December 25th. He wasn't born of a virgin. He was born of a rock. There's limited readings on him. And also, before even, I should have started this already, he came after Christianity. So he came after the fact, and people just started applying certain things to him, like that he was born of a virgin when the texts say he was born of a rock. Or the 12 disciples when he only had 2. What's it called? The concept of it only being taken from one picture, and just so much sources saying that he came from a rock. There was no virgin birth. There was no December 25th birth, and he wasn't even born a child. He was born a man.
All right. Well, fascinating from both of you guys. Definitely impressed. So, Stormbird, if you want to ask him a question, and then Edward can respond, or if you want to ask him a question, he can respond. And if anybody else wants to ask a question, we can do that too.
All right. You want me to go first?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so how do you feel about the history of the New Testament writings? Do you believe they were actually written the first century AD, or are you okay with at least conceding with many scholars who argue it was written in the 4th century by followers?
I don't think I could hear the question. You cut out like halfway
I'm pretty
through.
sure I caught the question. What would you say about the New Testament writings? Would you say that they were written like 1st century, or would you say that would you agree with some scholars saying that they're written later than that?
I'd say around 1st century, yeah, because the teachings of Jesus went around, and that's what they had to use when they were converting Romans. That's what they had to use when they went, what's it called? When it's believed that Thomas went to India. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty early on, because pretty soon after Jesus was killed, that's when they started, like when in the Acts of the Apostles, that's when the gospel, like there was more disciples than just 12, because they had to go out and preach the gospel. They had the word with them. And that's, where they took it. So I'd say it's much, much earlier than scholars say.
Yeah, fair enough. And he did say some scholars, so I appreciate the clarification on that, Zoo. Edward, did you want to ask him a question?
Okay, yeah, I have a question. Why do you say that these similarities from later texts that came after Christianity, mean that somebody pulled from these later texts and made a certain narrative of Christianity, even though there's historical evidence to back up some of the things in the Bible? You there, Zoo?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Did you hear the question?
Yeah, I heard you. Okay, I'm glad you asked that question and everything, because it's exactly which one I wanted you to ask. I was kind of foreshadowing this. So, the reason why some and many scholars kind of argue about the date that the New Testament manuscripts were written is because we've got like 5,700 manuscripts, and none of them are older than the 4th or late 3rd century. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about how many of things are carried on orally until codified later, which is why I'm of the belief that it was probably written later than the Mithra traditions. And the followers that wrote this and everything had time to basically take their oral tradition and fuse it with others before codifying it into a polished piece of work.
Okay, now that would have to be true if they took the Mithras tradition. Now, if you look at the Mithraic texts, it doesn't say anything about him being either a teacher or have 12 disciples. He wasn't even born of a virgin. He wasn't born on December 25th. They don't even know when he was born. There's no records to show.
Yep.
Like,
But in the 3rd and 4th century, they did worship Mithra on the 25th as his birthday. Even whether or not the scripture on that agrees with that and everything, that was popular belief at that time, during the time when the Romans started turning Christianity into a state religion.
Okay, that's all fine and good, but that still isn't even a mandate in Christianity that you have to worship. You have to praise Jesus' birth on December 25th. Nobody knows that it's December 25th.
It was on the Council of Nicaea, but yeah.
No, but still, here's the thing, right? If somebody says that Mithras was born on December 25th, and the scholars who study Mithra say that they don't know when he was born, and then you look at the scholars who say that Jesus was born on 25th, but they don't know, or they just have an approximation. If nobody knows, taking a definitive statement, from a source that already does not know is really weak, because it falls apart very quickly. Because one, Jesus was like, we don't know if Jesus was born on December 25th. We don't know if Mithras was born on December 25th.
Born at all.
So, yeah, the Tactus Receptus of Jesus' child disagrees with you. The Roman government disagrees with you. The Jews who killed him disagree with you. But I mean, that's fine and good. But to finish my response, I was going to say, nobody. If this is basically a non sequitur, because either side does not know if they were born on December 25th. So to say that the story of Jesus is stolen from the story of Mithras, and say that because Mithras was born on December 25th, when you don't know that, and say that because Jesus was born on December 25th, they stole that from Mithras, when either side doesn't know, it just doesn't work, man. Like, and that's just one of the problems with the story of Mithras versus Jesus.
But see, here comes the thing: the people did worship the birth of truth on the 25th. That's not part of Scripture, just like Christianity does.
The thing about Christianity is the prescriptions of what people are supposed to do come through the Bible. So the Bible says nothing about Jesus being born on December 25th. It only talks about a star and the wise men that came to see him, and him being born in a manger. All of which Mithras did not fit the description of. Hold on, I'm almost done. All of which Mithras does not fit the description of. So he didn't fit those descriptions, and he didn't fit the later ones, and he still doesn't fit them now. Even if somebody adds like what they want, they haven't added that to the Bible either, that Jesus was born on December 25th, or even the Bible that has been proven to be unchanged. So this is a loose standard, really, because
the Bible that's been translated more times than any other book has not been unchanged. Are you seriously saying that?
Yes, I'm seriously saying that, because I gave you the parameters which makes it unchanged in the beginning of this. They took the original Hebrew. Hold on, I'm almost done, man. The original Hebrew is the Torah. So the Torah, and then the Old Testament was written in Greek. So the Torah that they translated to Greek with the New Testament that is written in Greek, that's together called the Septuagint. So then after that, the King James Version came around, and then the Alexandrian scripts came around. The Alexandrian scripts came from, I think, Egypt. So the Alexandrian texts that's what the NIV, RSV, ESV, that's what all those come from. And if you look inside the NSV or all of those, you'll find over 16 missing verses, straight up missing. Just the number there, no verse sometimes. Words cut out completely. Whole verse is just gone, right? So when you look at the King James Version and how it has the Septuagint, which is the direct copy from the Torah and the New Testament as it was written originally, and then you have that, right? So that's the standard. That's the one that's already the oldest. So it's already sitting there, but it doesn't have the nail in the casket to say that yes, this is unchanged. Then they find the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1942, and they see that the Dead Sea Scrolls and the King James Version and the Septuagint all match up. Nothing was taken out, nothing was added to, nothing. Like if anything, like I know that the Dead Sea Scrolls had a few apocrypha in it, but that was just about it. Now, the Apocrypha are that's another debate whether or not they're inspired or not. But the whole gist of that is the Bible, the King James Bible, did survive the 2,000-year test of time and is verified from outside sources, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls found in a cave in 1942, 2,000 years after it was translated.
Or 1600.
The 1611. Oh, yeah, my bad. If it's about 1600 years. Sorry. Also, a lot of the accounts of Mithras are secondhand, by the way. They're not even like textual.
See, the issue though is that with canonics and everything is that okay, so we have men deciding which ones are divinely inspired based off men who who say that it's divinely inspired. Dude, the logic on that's not adding up.
Well, the logic on it is that
There's room for error. There's definitely Okay, so translation is not an exact science. This is a problem that a lot of people have. It's more of an art. There's people who has painstakingly went through and picked out which ones they think is the most suitable transcripts out of what 5,700 manuscripts that they have.
The way they translate, not translated, sorry, the way they copied the Torah was taking it letter by letter. And if they had any, like if they compared, like when they compared copies, if there was any spelling mistake, they threw it out and started over. Also, that's how Moses received the Torah. He received it letter by letter, because inside the Torah, there's little, you call it heptadic, you call it the heptadic structure, where there's properties that lie beneath the scripture when you read the original Hebrew. And if you notice the way the Hebrew language works, each letter has a definition and has a meaning, and also together it'll spell out a message. Not it's not begging not gematria. It's not begging the narrative like gematria or Kabbalah, but it's on the border. Like equidistant letter sequencing is on the borderline of gematria. But why it's used is when you use it with a Bible prescribed pattern, like the sevens, you'll actually find things like whenever you do it in a certain passage, it will show up something that's relative to what's going on. So if you're reading it and it's talking about like what's it called? Where was it? It was in, I think, Deuteronomy, where they went through and they did the equidistant letter sequencing, and it said the names of the genealogy of Joseph, I think, in order, like chronological order, like things that are relative to what's going on. So it's not so much that they're like pulling from anything.
Just to ask though, is you're ascribing to this extra biblical, extra Torah oral tradition that Moses actually received the Torah and gave it to the people directly, and they scribed this down and everything, then why haven't we found any pre-Babylonian box script manuscripts of the Torah that would have been written in the more Semitic linguistics of Moses at the time? Why have we not found that? It seems to suggest, in my opinion, and from what I've researched and everything, that I would agree with modern scholars that it's most likely that during the Persian time, 5th century BC, was when the Torah was finalized, and between that and before Christ, then that would have been the time when the Tanakh was completely finalized.
Well, that's what the Dead Sea Scrolls were. That's like the Old Testament in the original Hebrew, and they found those in a cave in 1942. So they do have texts from that time of the original Hebrew, like the Torah.
They're not Babylonian script. There's still Babylonian cuneiform script.
There's Babylonian cuneiform and there's Mesopotamian cuneiform and all of that. But here's the thing about that and the Torah,
which would have likely suggested that it was written during the Babylonian exile or afterwards, because of the fact that it's in Aramaic or Biblical Hebrew. I'm talking about the Mosaic Hebrew, which predates that by quite a bit and has changed a lot. We can see this within older inscriptions and everything that look almost alien because they're not written in that box script that you're familiar with when you're looking at Hebrew.
I'm very certain that the the Dead Sea Scrolls are pre-Babylonian, because that's what people like when Moses got that, and he had like when they made copies of it and the people had the Torah. That's what the rabbis had, and that's what the teachers had and everything to teach the Torah. That's what they were using, because they got those texts before before they were brought into Egypt, before like the children of Israel and everything, because that's who God gave it to. He gave them to Moses, and he told Moses to give it to the children of Israel. Say ye Moses unto the children of Israel. So when we have those texts and we study them and we see even how King Cyrus was called out by name to have been taken, and even called out his military conquest in Babylon, how he took Babylon without a fight. That's in the Old Testament. That was what, Isaiah, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but King Cyrus was called out by name in the Bible. And then when all of that came to pass, that's documented history, that King Cyrus took Babylon without a fight and how he did it and everything. And now we have those texts and we have the original texts, and when we had cross-referenced them and did our tests were to see had they changed over time, then they didn't change. It's very safe to say, and plus with the historical backing behind it, the Tactus Receptus of Jesus' child and all those things, it's like the story isn't stolen, isn't edited, it isn't changed from anywhere. Like, even if somebody took a copy and changed that copy, the original was still there. Like, when they took the Alexandrian scripts and made the NIV, RSV, and had so much things taken out, the Septuagint was still there. It was not taken out. It wasn't removed or anything.
Still, it kind of seems a bit iffy when you're looking at the linguistics of it. Because, I mean, it is, okay, if you do look at them and the time of their dating, they date back to, what, 1st or 2nd century BC? So you got the linguistics and our timing and everything, which suggests that was still after the Babylonian exile. And the fact that it was written in Aramaic, which is a language they would have probably picked up during their exile in Babylon, which that was the language the Akkadians and the Babylonians spoke.
The New Testament was written in the 1st century. The Torah and it was written way before that, and that's what the Dead Sea Scrolls were. The Dead Sea Scrolls are the Torah, the Old Testament, and they were in the original Hebrew at that time.
Evidence showing that it was written 1,400 years ago. In fact, the evidence suggests another story that it was written after the Babylonian exile or during, or at least what manuscripts we have that exist today are from that era.
Are you talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were written way before the Babylonian era?
No, it wasn't. The Dead Sea Scrolls were in the second century.
1st and 2nd century.
Yeah, if you guys each want to post a source, either in general or in debate, we can look over those too. Does anybody else have any questions?
Is there anyone who could source check that for me? I'm on my phone right now, so I'm not really able to go look up a source very well while I'm doing this.
And your source checking like ancient Hebrew dates?
When scholars believe the Dead Sea Scrolls were written.
Yeah, I can look it up for you here.
Dead Sea Scrolls also have 5 books or 5 things of Enoch.
Yeah,
it's also missing the book of Esther is also missing from the Dead Sea Scrolls as well.
They got the scroll of war in it and whatnot, and that's a weird scroll that's interesting. But yeah.
Does anyone else have a question while I'm looking this up?
So, Zoo, your argument is that there seems to be more archaeological evidence that points towards more occultic religions and mythology rather than I can't even say that word. Jewish evidence for Jewish culture and Christian culture.
Yeah, my research, I've come to find that these esoteric secret cults and everything usually is where that begins, and later it gets codified into texts that become scriptures or myths or described in mythology. And this doesn't just happen with Judaism or Christianity. This happens with a lot of religions.
So I'll post I found one at History, Dead Sea Scrolls for you there. Keep in mind, I'm not holding a bias. I'm just kind of going to whatever pops up as far as the Dead Sea Scrolls are. From what I see, most scholars say that they can be upwards of 2,000 years old because these scrolls don't have a necessary date on them. They rely on other dating methods. So you've got 150 BC, which would predate Christ, up to 70 AD or 150 AD, but around that time. That's when it seems like most scholars here. I'll try to pull up another source for you. All
right, so allow me to clarify with what I was saying earlier. that seems to suggest it was definitely written after the Babylonian exile, because the Babylonian exile would have been to around the 6th century BC, which would have been 2,600 years now, not 2,000.
Yeah, for sure. And like I say, these are estimated dates too. So give and take. If people want to do their own research on this, it's definitely a heavy topic.
The texts don't have any Babylonian influence either. It talks like pretty, like,
Well, they are written in Aramaic as well, aren't they?
no, the Dead Sea Scrolls are written in Hebrew, but what's it called?
But the Babylonian script was something that was developed while the Hebrews and the Jews were in Babylonia.
Okay, but the Dead Sea Scrolls have no like citing towards anything to even suggest that Babylon was. Hold on, I'm almost finished. It has nothing to suggest that Babylon had any influence in the writing or records of that, because in the Bible, all throughout, it talks about how the children of Babylon are abominations, how Babylon is a part of constant abominations, how it's in constant strife against God. Just it's constantly being just like pointed out as this just sin city, like so for God to put his people through there and then have one of their core books edited by a bunch of people who.
Or I'm gonna offer a narrative. These people hated the Babylonians, so they wrote the Babylonians as the bad guys, as a reflection of how they, as a collective and the priesthood, felt about the Babylonians, and then said, God feels about the Babylonians this way.
Well, no, it was because they talked about how God's people fell to the abominations of Babylon. How what's it called? Even though there was a bunch of sin, like you said, they would every time there was some type of other god thing going on, they would fall to that, and people would start worshiping other deities and worshiping other statues and idols and stuff like that, because like the story of Israel is constant rebellion. It's not like they were staying on track with God and then God told them to do any of these things. They kept rebelling and doing other things. And also
100 years later, they're still hating on the Babylons. You call them Iraq. The Israelites Israeli still hate the Babylonians to this very day over a 2,600-year-old feud.
But this is like God's people going into a place and seeing abominations, like sexual perversion on the high scale. What's called mass killings. Either like when Nebuchadnezzar was king. Hold on,
And that's
I'm almost done.
theological
Let's let each other finish our points, and then you can refute. So I think just finish your point there, Edward, and then we'll let Zoo refute it.
Yeah, when Nebuchadnezzar was king, he killed. He had a dream and said he would kill everybody who couldn't interpret his dream. He was constantly a tyrant. Like he did a bunch of bad stuff, and he only came to at the end of it because he had seen how God had interpreted his dream. And then after that, after he, gave up the throne, King Cyrus took over, and he was about to do the same thing for people worshiping God. Like they wanted God out of that city entirely. And Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were only in there, because Babylon had ransacked their city and killed their parents and made them all eunuchs and kept them there just to work for them. And when they refused, that's what they were thrown to the furnace, and then when they were thrown to the furnace, also, what's it called? Nebuchadnezzar asked who the fourth was, and then they said that he had the likeness of the Son of God. So it's talking like Jesus in the Old Testament, and Nebuchadnezzar seeing Jesus in the Old Testament as well. So it's like,
yeah, I know what a Christophany is. Once again, that's New Testament interpretation of Old Testament. You'll see that a lot. But I mean, what my point is that on the realistic side of things, to this day, the Israelites the modern Israelis, still hate the Babylonians, aka the Iraqis. It's just for different reasons, and combined with their tribal hatred.
okay, that's too general to try and pin it on anything, because you just pointed out they have different reasons. If the reason was because you said before that they still hate them for however long. Hold on, I'm almost finished. You just said that you hate them they hate them for that the Israelites hate them for a spat over how many thousand years ago. But then you just said that they hate them for different reasons. So which one is it? Because if it's the same thing, if it's the same, either way, if it's the same reason why they were fighting thousands of years ago, or if it's for a different reason now, it's still too general to point to anything about their hate being contrived in the Bible.
Or it's more complex than we think, because it's a mixture of both forms of hatred, because the Jews have long memories, as they like to remind everyone else.
It's still too general to draw any conclusions, though.
Yeah, and before we get into like a back and forth spat, if we want to make another point and then refute it, or if someone else has a question, I'm gonna post a link in general that I found about the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's from a wiki source, so if you don't like wiki or if you like wiki, it's whatever. Does anybody else have a question?
Yeah, I had one about what was his name? Krishna. You said that the story of Jesus was taken from Krishna, or that word I can't remember the word, but how do you say that? How do you think that Krishna was taken from Jesus, or Jesus was taken from the story of Krishna?
Theology of grace is very something that you will see if you look into Krishna.
Okay, now with Krishna, he doesn't really match up with Jesus, especially through initial things like virgin birth. He wasn't born a virgin. His mom Devika was she wasn't a virgin. She had 7 sons prior to him, and sorry, what? Yeah, he what's it called? He was a teacher, but never taught in parables. He never really taught grace. He argued with the Hindu priest for focusing on rituals too much. That's from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:23. He didn't have a disciple named John. Arjuna doesn't even have any linguistic connection between John. Krishna lived to be 125 years old. He didn't die at 30. He was killed on accident by hunter Jara and ascended up to heaven. Jara thought he was a deer. Krishna wasn't crucified on a tree between 2 thieves. He wasn't the lion of the tribe of Saki. He wasn't the second person of the Trimurti. He was actually one of the 10 avatars of Vishnu, and that's more modalistic. Benjamin Walker says that Hinduism borrows extensively from Christianity. Dr. Edwin Bryant says these stories of Krishna can only be dated as early between the 4th to 6th century. What else? He was born during Janmashtami in August, not on December 25th, sorry. That's from Christian History, Thought and Culture, Lavanya Vensami, PhD, pages 139 through 140. And that's there wasn't even a star leading his birth. It was what's it called? There was no spices or gifts. It was only flowers sent from heaven. There was no 3 wise men. He was only persecuted by a tyrant. He's depicted dancing on like a serpent with 1,000 heads to kill it, but Jesus wasn't even depicted that way. The prophecy of Jesus, where he bruises the head of the serpent, that could be contrived as that, but Jesus was never even depicted this way. He was never seen doing anything like this. There's nothing in the Bible to show that he was.
You're taking these things way too literally, and you're definitely not seeing it from the other side.
I'm looking at the teachings of Krishna and what Krishna did, and I'm looking at the teachings of what Jesus said and did, and they do not match up. I'm not taking it too literally. I'm looking at each, and I'm not making any parallels because there are no parallels to make because they don't match up.
You literally just named a couple of things that were parallels, but then you immediately dismissed them because you found a way to be like, nah, there's no way the author could have done this.
No, I'm bringing that up because it's a usual point that people try to say, but I'm saying here's why that parallel doesn't even work. It's a false parallel, false narrative, stuff like that. So like, people will say like, oh, Mithras was born December 25th, and say things like that, like as a common, rebuttal to the Christianity story. But we don't even say that Jesus was born on December 25th. We don't even know. So drawing that conclusion and drawing other conclusions from things that are way too general to pin anything on, it doesn't really make sense, nor does it correlate.
Does anybody have another question? I mean, sure. Like I could ask a question, I guess.
Ooh, shoot one.
Well, do you guys know what happens between the 22nd and the 25th of December?
It's the solstice. Yeah.
It's where the sun sits the lowest for 3 days, and on the third day it rises.
That's the point I was making earlier. Went way over his head. It's kind of something I was arguing about earlier about how these are anthropomorphizations of things that people observe, and then
Yeah, your mic keeps cutting out there, Zoo.
that's just something you see in legends and fables all the time. Is they take something that's an observation and personify it or anthropomorphize it into something more relatable, and also kind of obscures the meaning to a lot of people who don't like read between the lines.
The first copy of the Bible was written through the stars. Actually, if you look at the constellations, they tell the entire story of the Bible from start to finish. I'm pretty sure that's called the Mazzaroth or something. But if you also look at how people make later connections to the Bible, like the Zodiac, like with the 12 disciples, when they just do not match whatsoever. So people making certain connections for certain things and certain connections actually being valid, like the gospel in the stars is a thing, right? So it's not like because what you're saying is that people took from the stars and then made the story of the Bible when the Bible was made from the story of the stars, or the story through the stars. So either way, like,
then why is 12 such a recurring number on all the pantheons?
Sorry, can you say that one more time? I only heard the end of that.
This is then why is 12 such a common reoccurrence throughout all these pantheons, whether it be the Greco-Roman, whether it be some of the other ones. Like, why 12?
12 is actually pretty mediocre in like Christianity. The primary one is usually 7, and you'll find incredible, absolutely immaculate findings when you look at how 7 is used. Things that don't even pair. Hold on, I'm almost finished, man. This is literally the last point. Like, things that don't even correlate between other religions, or it can't be contrived from anything. No human could do what was done with that.
Except venerate the number 7 itself, which
Actually, no, because when you look at some of the sequences involved with 7, they're irrepeatable to a sense where if you had 1 million supercomputers and had 4 million years to shoot away, you still couldn't get it. Because there's certain, like, if you look at the genealogy of Jesus, each word meets a certain parameter where, like, each thing has to use a certain amount of letters, vowels, nouns, pronouns, and like all of that. So when that's called the heptadic structure discovered by Dr. Ivan Panin. If you look at the parameters that he found, like the 50, what's it called? He found 54 rules, but for each of those rules, to get the scripture to come out like that, you'd have to, it would take a lot of tries. So if you had enough tries, like if you took 10 tries per second with 1 million supercomputers, and you had like a couple million years to spare, it would take like 200 trillion tries when you get to rule 59 to try and get it right, with 100 million supercomputers and 4 million years to spare. So it's like, it's not the same as like when people skip around and what's it called, or throw a bunch of random sequences until you get a Romeo and Juliet or something like that. It's literally, you're examining the scripture, you're already just reading it to try and understand it, and you see the reoccurrence of 7 in places where God favors it, like when he said he tests his word in an iron furnace 7 times, and other places where, you know, he rested on the 7th day and thought everything was perfect on the 7th day. Other sequences involved in that, you'll find staggering things, even the last 12 verses of Mark. If you look at the gospel and examine the same things, or the 4 gospels, you can't tell who wrote it first. You can't tell who decided on a pattern to write it, like to put all those sequences to wow somebody. you can't even pin when it was written, who wrote what first, because all of them came out differently. And if you compare each sequence that you find in the other, you can't find it because they're all unique.
Yeah, fascinating.
Doesn't explain why 7 recurs and all these other fables and whatnot before Ham.
Well, the thing about them recurring and things before it is, when you look at it, does it have any of the markings that the ones in the Bible do? Because the ones in the Bible have staggering ones where they did equidistant letter sequencing on a genealogy in the Old Testament. I'm going to put this one in general chat. Probably should do a recorded voice. I'm going to put it in recorded voice as well, or recorded event. Sorry, recorded event. They skipped the set, like a 49 letter interval. Sorry for this one, and they got a message when in the genealogy. It said, "Man is like if you actually no, it wasn't. Sorry, it wasn't equidistant letter sequencing for this one. It was what the people's names were in the Bible. So, like the genealogy of Adam, it said, "Man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down, teaching. His death shall bring to the despairing comfort and rest." That's Jesus. Like, there's multiple ones talking about Jesus beforehand. There's one in Isaiah saying, "My name is Yahweh." There's another one in where was it? The genealogy of David, or the one that had Tamar and all those, in like looking at the definitions of their names, even Abraham and Sarai, when she was Sarai before and he was Abram before, the hey in Hebrew means to, like, he breathed life into them. And after he was given that, he was able to have, or she was able to have kids, and he led an army he led an army of 318 men to and they decimated stuff. They were good fighters, like 318 men. Like, several things in the Bible, several battles, several historical events that are recorded history and outside of sources. And then the Bible itself showing on 3 different layers, like on top, below, when you look at the sequences, and then even a little deeper, you'll find out where it has all these things that are just literally irrepeatable. No man can do these types of things. Because if you took rules that these sequences abide by and try to as a man try to get it to come out that way, it takes a long time. Just for 2 rules, there's like 50.
That's fascinating stuff. And I think Zoo would agree with me, and Edward too. You know, math has always been used, like it's universal among all languages, and people in all cultures, in all, you know, religious sects have always used math, not only in their texts, but found certain numbers, you know, sacred or holy or perfect in some way or another. So I guess I had a couple questions for both of you guys. So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here a bit, because I don't think anybody else is going to be asking questions. And if you guys do have questions, please speak up and ask your questions. But my first question is to Edward, and it's very simple. Edward, could you be wrong about your faith?
Personally, I don't think I could be wrong about the God I've chosen, but you know, there's always that possibility that there's just, you know, one thing you might miss about which God, you know, you chose. But I'd say there's extremely concrete and evidence that there is a God. It's just, as far as which God, my own feelings say I'm right, but you know, I could be wrong about which God.
Yeah, sure. And it seems like you guys have both done your research too, so that's a humble answer. So Zoo, I guess my question for you, if what Edward is saying, if it's true, if Christianity is true, would you become a Christian? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
We'll take a silence for a yes.
Yeah, if you want to type your answer in general, Zoo, we can't actually hear your mic. I don't know if it's cutting out or what, but it looks like he's typing. But either way, great debate, you guys. You guys have both pumped out some good stuff here, giving us all a lot to think about and to study. Yeah, okay, sure. And that's a humble answer too. He says yes if everything he said was true. So we got humble answers from both of you guys, and I appreciate it. So, do you guys want to do closing remarks?
Yeah. Like this whole thing, it wasn't it was a really good spirited debate. You know, it was. I liked what you had to bring, Zoo. Some points were I'm glad you brought up because it was a point for me to. Okay, your mic's dead. Okay.
Yeah, so just
can-
keep it short because he
Yeah.
doesn't have a chance to put his closing in. But yeah, if you want to continue on, Edward, it sounds like you're even just humble delivering your closing here. But thanks again, Storm. We should do it again soon.
Yeah, dude. Also, Storm, you could probably type it and Dorgan could read it out. But yeah, this was a chance for me to learn a little bit more as well, like about certain belief systems, to know if they do line up with Christianity in a certain way or if they don't. You know, and even to look into more things like Canaanites and Mesopotamian stuff. So pretty cool, man. I've never really met somebody who actually who follows that.
Yeah, awesome from both sides. You guys are great. And thank you all for joining. Definitely follow us on all social media. It looks like Zoo's going to type something here. If this is his closing, I will speak it aloud and try not to stutter on my words. But again, thank you guys for joining, and definitely check out the media, YouTube, Instagram, all the platforms. We'll just wait for Zoo to finish up here. But yeah, no, I love these debates because when people can keep it civil, things go well. I've never been to a debate where someone walks away saying, yeah, you got me, man. You got me. That's usually not how debates work. So from the questions I've asked, even my 2 questions, I've seen some very, very humble answers. So I appreciate you guys both for being that way. I think Zoo is still typing here. If anybody else has a question, it'd have to be for Edward. Zoo is going to have to type out his answer if you ask him a question, but is there anybody else here that wants to ask a question? I'll cue the Jeopardy music. Bing, bong, bong, bong. Yeah. Good stuff, and I hope to see some more debates in the future. If anybody here wants to schedule a debate with someone else, we can definitely do that. We do these 8 p.m. every single day, I believe. And we also do a Church of Camelot on Sundays. I believe it's 4 p.m. Central, if I'm correct. Okay. Yeah, so Zoo's finished up with his closing here, and I'm going to read it for you guys. To end this, I would like to point out that my actual beliefs are hard to describe because I ascribe to esoteric systems. Ultimately, I believe in a divine creator God who is known by many names and faces, and he calls him Zoo. And I think Yahweh is a form of Zoo. All right. Well, great closing, and I hope everybody got that. But yeah, Paulie, if you want to take us off, thanks Magical for the opening. And yeah, great stuff, fellas. I had a lot of fun here listening.
Yeah, good stuff, guys.